So last night was the first presidential debate of
Yep.
the 2016 season. What did you think?
Well, everybody was talking about this was going to be the Super Bowl, that we were going to have 100 million people. And
Yeah, I think we'll see how the Nielsen ratings will come out. I think what will be particularly interesting is what happens online. I was checking out some of the folks that were streaming. So about 58 minutes in, I looked at YouTube. There were 1.2 million simultaneous viewers on YouTube last night. Another 110,000 on Facebook and another 90,000 on Washington Post. I saw Bloomberg Politics on Twitter, but they didn't seem to be showing statistics, or at least I couldn't find them. But I think one of the messages is there were a lot of people viewing this thing online, not on television.
And I think that'll be interesting about who was watching and how they were watching, because the kinds of voters that Clinton and Trump are chasing are vastly different demographically. They consume media in vastly different ways. But I think the key thing, whether it was TV or streaming or second screen or any of those things, is that you had I think the 100 million figure is pretty solid. I think they met that. I think the question now is, and from a messaging standpoint, because one of the things when we do media training with our clients, we're always talking about that any media appearance is an opportunity for you to push your messages to the people watching at home, listening at home, reading tweets online, that sort of thing. And I think from that standpoint, Hillary Clinton outperformed Donald Trump. I think one of the things I kept listening for when she would say you. One of the things that Bill Clinton would always talk about in his presidential elections is that my opponent wants to make this election about me. I want to make this election about you, your problems, your hopes and dreams, what government can do to make your life a little bit easier. And Hillary Clinton did that. I think Donald Trump wanted to make this debate about me. Why won't I release my taxes? Why I shouldn't release my taxes? Why my businesses are great? Why my new Washington hotel came in under budget and on time? So I think Trump really missed an opportunity to talk to voters. He was really got himself into a conversation both with Hillary and also I think with Lester Holt to some extent, and ignored the fact that there were 100 million people watching him, wanting to see how he reacted and what he had to say.
Yeah, I tuned into that as well. I think Hillary did a good job with that, although I have to say that this was Donald Trump's first time in a real one-on-one debate. He didn't have to do that during the primary. It was a much wider field, and when it got narrow, he stopped showing up or stopped being interested. Hillary has had a lot more practice. As I recall, it seems to me she ran for president in 2008.
Yep.
It seems to me that she's done some solo performances in front of some congressional committees and had quite a few other opportunities. Yeah. So I think more practiced. But look, there's 3 more debates to go, and I'm sure that Donald Trump and his team are closely reviewing the tape and coming up with a new strategy for the next debate.
Yeah, that's true. She's had a lot of practice debating. No one has had any practice debating Donald Trump. So I think think for a rookie outing in that instance, she did pretty well. I think the other thing too, and you're right. This was Trump's first time in a one-on-one debate. This was also Trump's first time in a relatively quiet room. Primary debates are raucous, they're loud, you crowd reactions encouraged. There was a lot of crowd reaction for a presidential debate last night. I thought there was, people were hooting and hollering and got some applause lines in, and then they got some laughter in there.
That's a great point, is that on to Lester Holt. I thought that overall I was pleased with how he did. I think he has to feel okay about how he did, although the baseline was fairly low with the
Lauer line.
Yes, the Lauer line, exactly. And he did do a good job, particularly at the beginning, of keeping them on time, although I think that eventually it kind of got away from him. I think the same thing of the audience that he was quite specific in saying, please hold your applause. This is your one opportunity, and there certainly was, as you said, some hooting and hollering throughout.
I think also with respect to the moderation, because Lester Holt, some moderators basically sit there with a stopwatch. 2-minute statement, 1-minute rebuttal, 30 seconds if the candidate wants another 30 seconds. And I think the first 20 minutes of the debate, Lester Holt was hewing to those timelines. And I think Trump was actually helped by that. I think Trump had a pretty cogent 2-minute answer on trade. He had a 2-minute answer on infrastructure. He had a 2-minute answer on jobs, and those came right at the top of the debate usually when tone gets set, and he did well with that. I think what Lester Holt did later is he just let them talk, and if they wanted more time, we'll give them more time, and we'll explore and explore and explore a certain topic. And one of the things when we do media training is we always warn our clients. Most people talk until they make a mistake. And I think the more time Trump was given to talk, he felt more and more of a need to fill that silence. And I think also as the debate went on and Hillary realized that Trump's temperament was the defining issue of this debate. I mean, I can't think of an exchange on taxes or exchange on anything, but everything Trump reacted to, that she was like, I'm just going to keep feeding him rope and let him hang himself with it.
Yeah, I think that's right. She, it seemed like one of the key parts of her strategy last night was to needle him, and he definitely kept it together for the first, I would say, probably a little bit more than 20 minutes. I would go so far as to say the first half. I think he did pretty well, but eventually she got under his skin. And that was evidenced to me by the tone of his, the volume of his voice went up. He just started speaking louder.
Yeah.
And his answers seemed to, as you said, just sort of go on and on and on. To the question about cybersecurity, his 10-year-old son got into the answer about cybersecurity. His 10-year-old son has a computer and is great with computers. And that seemed not particularly cogent to the question at hand, whereas I did feel that Hillary's answer, while not a great answer, was at least structured in the right way.
Well, I think the cybersecurity one is a good example of this, because I actually liked when he talked about his 10-year-old son, because I thought it humanized him. It showed that he has a family for whom he cares about. He wants his son to grow up in a better country, everything like that. If he had stopped with the 10-year-old son and not moved on to the 400-pound hacker in his mom's basement, that would have been a good answer. Or if he had then pivoted and said, on cybersecurity, I'm not the one with the cybersecurity issue, in my past. Right. That could have been a good answer. But I think also, and I mean, I'm not a connoisseur of Trump's speeches, but I've never heard him mention a 400-pound hacker before. I mean, that seemed like a spur of the moment improvisation that pulled him off message.
All right. So, what did you think was the point that fell flattest for Hillary?
I think her trade answers. Either she doesn't have a good answer on why, what is different about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, she did go back to her book and say, if this trade deal is negotiated properly and fairly, then it will be the gold standard. And then now she can say, well, they didn't, and so it wasn't. And Trump pushed her on that. But I think also it really, she came back to preparedness, temperament, things of that nature that I think really just resonated. I mean, for all of the talk about, oh, well, Clinton is going to have more policy specifics, I mean, we really did not get into a lot of policy last night. It really became a referendum on Donald Trump, on his business practices, on his temperament, on things he said in the past. And And I think for the people Hillary needs to reach, that's still useful. I think the way Hillary ended everything, and we train people on a message diamond where you hit your message, you expand your message, and then you come back to your message. I mean, I think one of the things that's gonna linger after this debate is forgotten is that comment about Alicia Machado, and that Trump called her Miss Piggy, called her Miss Housekeeping. He demeaned her, and she has a name, and she's volunteering for me. They were immediately up with digital ads on that. I wouldn't be surprised if you Google her name, if it's surrounded by Hillary Clinton ads and content. And I think for that, and given the fact that you look at the polls, Hillary Clinton has a problem with young voters, women voters, and Hispanics right now. And that message where she was basically speaking to young Hispanic women who understand what it's like to be disrespected and ignored, to elevate that, particularly at the end, I think is going to be very useful for her electorally down the stretch.
Yeah, I think for Donald Trump, the points that fell the most flat, I think Hillary was very successful on the issue of taxes. His taxes, I think she hammered him on that, and he just didn't have a great answer. There were parts that were a little bit convoluted. There were parts where it was just a dodge, and even when Lester Holt kind of pressed him on it, he dodged again. And that, for me, I think was a real miss. On the other side, I felt that his point on NAFTA was very, very strong. He made it incredibly well. And that Hillary's defense was, well, I think my husband did okay in when he was president, did not particularly serve her very well, in particularly in that moment. Agree with you on the message diamond. I think that Donald Trump definitely tried to adhere to it, but his diamond was a little flatter. I think it went, sort of very, very wide, and then tried to come back with a ribbon, at the end of it. But I don't know that he always succeeded with that kind of final punch.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting about debates because usually the time constraints in a debate are helpful to the more verbose candidate. Like we were talking about this, we were talking about how in if you go back and look at past first debates, the 2000 Bush-Gore debate, Bush was helped by the fact that he had time constraints, he had cogent, short arguments, policy specifics for 2 minutes. That helped him. 2004, John Kerry was thought of being as very wordy and verbose, but he had to confine himself into 2 minutes, and he did, and he came off a lot sharper than President Bush did in the 2004 debate. In Denver in 2012, it was that advantaged Mitt Romney. I think had the debate been structured a little tighter, Trump could have benefited a little better, but I think last night was good television. Lester Holt got out of their way, and if Trump chooses to get in his own way with his own words in his own debate, that's on him.
Yeah. So for me, when I ask myself the question, did Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton convince anyone new that they are right for the job? I think that Donald Trump did a great job keeping to his base, and he certainly was endeavoring to appear presidential, and I think that was a mixed bag, but that particularly early on he did succeed in doing that. He certainly addressed the issue of temperament, tried to communicate that in fact he has a great temperament and that he could, would be an effective and capable president. But I'd love to What do you think?
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you that this was a base debate. This was let's toss some red meat. Let's throw some zingers. Let's do things like that. The funny thing is this was not a base audience. This was 100 million people watching, and I think there was this odd moment in some of the debate, post-debate analysis, where people were like, they knew how they could score it on their traditional pundit scorecard, but they were like, we don't know how the public's going to react to this. Like, I think there was kind of this, well, Trump did terrible, but maybe the voters liked terrible. Maybe the voters wanted someone who was going to poke at her on emails and say taxes are none of your business and things like that.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. And as we look back, however this election turns out, is that this will be a fascinating case study because of their two radically different approaches. And Donald Trump actually addressed some of this on the podium, which was, Hillary has spent huge amounts of money on attack ads and on big data and technology, and he and his campaign have essentially willfully ignored that. And despite their ignoring it, they appear to be neck and neck in most of the polls. So the question will be, I think we can look at it through a couple of lenses. When I think about it through the digital lens, is that at a minimum that data and science and a kind of very, very studied approach can be incredibly competitive when put up against the traditional blast of the media, be on TV as much as possible. But look, the proof will be in the pudding, and we're 40-something days away from knowing the answer.
Yeah, and I think it's also a question of, because you and I have worked on a lot of campaigns. We've worked with a lot of great candidates. We've worked with some not so great candidates. But, I think one of the things that when you look at it from that perspective is any candidate with a pulse can get 40-45%. Particularly in an electorate that is so polarized, and people have sorted themselves. They know what party they're in. They know how they're going to. 9 times out of 10, it's an easy decision who they're going to vote for. And I think for a lot of people, this election is not an easy decision because you have two candidates who are both sitting at around 45% right now. And the question is will superior organization, will use of these new technologies and these new organizing tools, will that help push Hillary past Trump, or is it a question of temperament that pushes Hillary past Trump, or is it a question of Trump has excited people who have stayed home for a long time because they never saw anybody who spoke to them or any reason to turn out?
Well, that's a great point. Is that I did a little bit of looking, and in 2012, 57.5% of the electorate turned out to vote. In other words, slightly more than half of the people who can vote did vote in 2012. One thing that Donald Trump, I think, is certainly thinking a lot about is appealing to that other near half of the country who has not been to the polls lately. In 2008, it was a little bit higher, maybe 62%, but I think in 2004 it was maybe 50% of the country, 50.4% of the country. So we'll see. Certainly my hope from a civics perspective is that more people turn out. I think we certainly have, with all the people who watch this debate, there certainly seems to be a little bit of renewed interest in civics, the direction of the country, and I would love to see more people get involved with politics, no matter what.
And that's true. And I think it's also a question of, this election has been so unusual that it's actually broadened the map and made room for that increased civic engagement. People were talking the other day about why is Ohio so close. Well, Ohio is so close is because Ohio has been the center of the political universe for so long. Everybody is registered. Everybody gets touched. On both sides, every voter gets touched 2, 4, 10 times. And everybody knows all the moves, you know. And then you look at like an example where like the 2nd congressional district in Maine, which has never been in play,
That's right.
and is suddenly being lavished with attention. And you know, I was asking a friend of mine who's Canadian, like, is it even possible for you to like do a radio ad in New Brunswick and have people in like Caribou, Maine listen to it? Like, you know, and we had a conversation about that, and we're like, you know, I don't think the Canadian broadcasters would allow you to run a U.S. political ad. And then we talked a little bit more that it's probably more effective to just do digital and direct mail than hope that somebody's listening to New Brunswick radio.
All right. Well, look, it's 8 days, I think, until the to the next one.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to seeing how both candidates change
Yep.
their approach.
Well, Trump says he was restrained in this debate, so you know, which I think sets himself up. Either he's unrestrained,
right.
and we're right back here, and if he doesn't, then it's a question of you know, as Trump would say, is he choking?
Yeah. Well, 8 days. I'll meet you right back here.
We'll be right back.
All right.